My family was highly Scottish growing up. Scottish and Irish. November 16th, it was its own holiday in our family, That's the feast day of St. Margaret of Scotland, my 27th great-grandmother. And so 2012, when the movie Brave came out, my family fell in love with that movie. But I didn't. I didn't hate it. I just couldn't see the hype behind it. Finally, this last week, I watched it again, and yeah, I like it now. Like, I'm not even going to try to draw it out too much. I like that movie now, and I want to talk about why. So let's jump in to the movie Brave from 2012. I love my Scottish heritage, and last year especially, moving up to Alaska, a couple weeks ago went on to the Scottish Highland Festival here in Palmer, Alaska. So I love this movie now because it is so my family, so me. It's so just putting new ideas in my head about my stories and all, and just this, I just feel at home with the Scottish stuff. And it's just the music. Before I hated the music, now the music is just not all of it is the greatest, but there are some songs that I just I love listening to some of these songs in it. The story is just a beautiful, touching story about a mother and a daughter coming closer together, and it's just a very touching little story. I think it does a great job playing into some basic roots in Scottish mythology and just we're also just keeping it to a simple, this is the story. But it's a lovely little story there. From the very beginning, it sets up, who Meredith is. It sets up how her mother acts when she was a little kid versus when she's older, and I love that little connection there of Meredith as she gets older and how she sees her mother now, playing off of what she used to think of her mother. Is just interesting. You see the first scene with Muldoon, you see how her father reacts to him, you get to see the first glimpses of Will-o'-the-Wisp and how it leads her back to her family, and also drawing Muldoon back to Thumb. So then there's that fight, you hear about her father's leg getting cut off. It's just a pretty fun opening that I'm like, hey, I like this. The characters in the story is pretty fun. I think one of the reasons why I didn't like it as a kid was because, and it really comes down to my character as a person, my personality. If you haven't noticed this on this channel before, I've mentioned it multiple times, but if you want to get me to hate something, what you do is you tell me it's the greatest of all time. If you asked 12-year-old me when I first watched Frozen, what are your thoughts about Frozen? I would be saying it's the worst thing in the world. I probably wouldn't have said that, but I was pretty big on the fact that I did not like Frozen because everyone was saying how great it was. I'm like, it's not that great. I think that's somewhere where I come from with this. My whole big thing about, how much I hate Star Wars. Well, some of that comes from because people compare it to something incredible like The Lord of the Rings, and the moment you do that, I'm like, hey, Star Wars is not actually that bad. I'm gonna admit it now. Star Wars is not that bad. It's just it's not as great as people say it is. That's the problem with Star Wars. It's just not as great as people say it is. So the moment someone says Star Wars is great, I'm like, no, it's not. So I think that's where I came from with this movie. I was like, my whole family was like, this movie is incredible. And I'm like, it's not though. It's not. So I had to hate on it just because of that. So now watching, I'm like, I'm gonna allow myself to like this movie. And the moment I did that, I'm like, hey, I like this movie. The biggest complaint people have about this movie is that it sets up this idea of this mysterious story with, the trailer was brought up the wisp, and it's oh, this is the mist, and it's oh, this is gonna be incredible, and it was it wasn't that, and people were like, oh, how dare it not be like that. And what I was realizing when I was watching it was, well, that's just how a myth works. Right now on my book channel, I'm breaking down the Iliad, and when you read something like the Iliad, you're gonna hear names like this person, son of Heracles, this person, it's just myth is built off of myth. So this idea that you have to answer every single myth in the story is not necessary. Just like in the Iliad. The Iliad is a complete story, even if it doesn't answer every single myth that's connected. That's just a myth. So really when it comes down to it is the whole story with the four brothers. They go into that story, but it's such a cool story they could go more into. That was one of the things that made me oh, this movie is terrible. But now that I think about it, it's okay, yeah, maybe Pixar could make a spin-off of it, which is just the story of the brothers. But the point of the story was not, that was just a side point in the story. It's such a cool story, but it just built on the character. If you read something like The Lord of the Rings, you're gonna find that the story is so deep, not because Tolkien answers every single myth in the story, but because he has these myths going on in the story, goes deeper than the book itself. When you have them at Weathertop and Aragorn sings the song of Beren and Luthien, you don't really get too much information on who those two people are, but if you read the Silmarillion, if you read the Song of Beren and Luthien, the book, you get more of that story. How you make the story more deep is not by answering every question, but saying, hey, there are all these myths in this world that we are not fully answering. And so yeah, they have a little bit of answering of that tale. But yeah, could you make a spin-off movie of Brave that goes into more of that story? Yes, that could be fun. When it comes down to it, Brave is the story of a mother and a daughter. That is what the story is about. All these extra stuff is just building up a deeper world around them, but it really comes down to those. You don't really go into too much of who this witch is, and the Will-O-the-Wisp, and the four brothers, and Mardoom, and like all, like you don't go into that as much. Like even like the Circle of Rocks, it never really gets answered, and that's a good thing. At first I would say that's a bad thing, but now I think of it more, it brings more depth to the story while also not taking away from the main story where, yeah, you have this other bear. Well, yeah, his story is epic onto itself, and I would love to see just the story of him. That would be fun. The point of him in this story was mainly as a lesson of the four tribes in the main part of the story. The mother and daughter relationship, this relationship of the mother becoming a bear, like that's the reason why he's in this story. And also just get more depth to the world around them. In the end, I don't think that's actually a complaint, and I think people who think that's a complaint misunderstand what myths and like tales are supposed to be like. The other thing that I think got on my nerves maybe once, but I realized this time I watched it, I'm like, no, is the fact that, wait, so people tend to think, I even saw a video once where someone was claiming that Meredith somehow married herself. No, that did not happen. Something watching this time around again that I realized is, wait, so people tend to have this idea that the story really like puts this idea of marriage bad, being in love bad. But no, like, wait, first of all, I would argue somewhat, you see, the most powerful character in the whole movie is definitely the mother. She's a married woman. The other thing is, what it does with the marriage pact and all, the decision they come down to is not that the mother just says, you don't have to get married. What it comes down to is she says, I am putting this in your hand now. You can get married when you want to. You can find love naturally. And so people say there's a message of anti-marriage, but it's not. It's a message of, like, right before saw this video, I looked up, yeah, the character, Merida, was 16 in this movie. At 16, you're like, yes, thinking of modern standards, 16-year-olds should not be getting married in the first place. But like back then, it was a little bit more normal. But it's like, if you talk to us, not all 16-year-olds want to get married. Just saying, like, most 16-year-olds nowadays should not get married. Back then, it was a little different, but we're not back then. So this idea of, okay, so she wasn't getting ready to get married. That's okay, and that's at least what I got from it. Some people may argue with me on this, but I think that's another reason why I didn't like it back then, was because it was just another one of those stories where it's just like, I don't need no man, and I'm like, but it's not that. That's not the story it's telling there. It's like, she's fighting for her independence. She started fighting, like, yes, at the end of the movie, she doesn't meet someone. It doesn't need that. But I think the problem is in modern years, we get a lot of just, I'm so different because we are having this movie where she doesn't have a love interest. Like, over and over again this happens. And so like Brave just gets fallen into the group, but Brave was one of the first ones to do that. And Brave does a pretty good job with it's not that. It's like, yes, she doesn't meet someone, but the story is not getting married bad, but it's being able to find love in your own timing good. So that's another one of those complaints that I had back then I don't have anymore. So overall, I like this movie now. Is it the best? No. Again, as someone who is Scottish through and through, I have a lot of English in me too, but you know, it's really those three: English, Scottish, and Irish. I love being Scottish. I would love to play a Scottish guy in a movie. That would be so much fun. But anyways, but yeah, I feel where my family is coming from with this movie now. Like, it feels like home to me. The Scottish Highlands, just that style just seems homey. So I love this movie now. It's definitely not my favorite Disney movie, but yeah, enjoy it. Tell me your thoughts below. If you want to hear me talk about any other movies like this on the channel, if you want to recommend any movies to me, feel free to comment down below them. Till next time, this has been the Movie Net Reviewer, Peter Wary, signing off.